Deborah, still in tears, sat on the edge of the bed as her mother-in-law continued raising her voice at her. "You, this barren woman!" Mother Christiana's voice rang out. She stood in front of Deborah, her gaze hard and unforgiving as she looked at Deborah, her anger glaring. "A girl again?" Mother Christiana's eyes narrowed as she took a step closer, her voice growing louder. "How many girls do you want to give my son? Are you planning on opening a girls' high school in my son's house?" she shouted, shaking her head in disgust. Deborah felt her breath catch in her throat. She didn't respond. She couldn't. She just stared at the ground, too broken to fight back. "Are you cursed from bearing a male child?" Mother Christiana's voice rose with fury. "I won't let you use your bad luck to affect my son. I've had enough. You had better leave my son's house and go back to your father's house." With those final words, Mother Christiana turned on her heel and stormed out of the room, leaving Deborah alone, tears slipping down her cheek. Deborah looked down at her newborn daughter, her heart heavy with guilt, sorrow, and frustration. She held her tighter, hoping to shield her from the cruelty of the family she had married into. Deborah and Sylvester had always been the kind of couple people admired. Their love seemed like something straight out of a fairy tale. Sylvester was kind, hard-working, and adored Deborah with the whole of his heart. Deborah, in return, loved him more. Together, they had 3 beautiful daughters, each one more precious than the last. Their home was filled with laughter and love, but it was also filled with the quiet tension Sylvester's mother inflicted on Deborah. It was his mother, Mother Christiana, the woman who had always been a pest over their marriage. Sylvester adored his mother, and Deborah had done her best to make her mother-in-law like her. She cooked her the best meals, kept the house clean, and tried to buy her whatever she buys for herself as a female. But as time went on, Deborah noticed that whatever she does is never enough or acceptable. She started noticing a subtle change in the way Christiana treated her. At first, the comments were small, almost harmless. While complimenting the children as they dressed for school, Mother Christiana said, "They are beautifully dressed. Well done, Deborah." Looking at their daughters, "But I'm sure Sylvester would love a son to carry on the family name." Her tone was light, but Deborah felt the weight of the words. Sylvester had smiled and brushed it off, saying, "Mama, don't worry about it. We have children and we love them, that's what matters." But Christiana's eyes had lingered on the girls, almost like she was waiting for something more. Deborah had hoped it was just an offhand comment, but the undercurrent of tension was starting to grow. The unspoken pressure had been there for a while, but when Deborah gave birth to their 4th child, another girl, things changed. It was like a quiet storm had been building inside Christiana, and it finally broke when Deborah gave birth to another girl child. That evening, Christiana arrived at the house uninvited. She barely greeted Deborah, instead walking straight into the living room and sitting down, her eyes cold and calculating. "Another girl," she said, her voice flat but sharp. "I thought this one would be different. Maybe it's a curse. It doesn't seem ordinary at this point." Deborah tried to hide her anger, keeping a pleasant smile on her face. "Mama, you should at least be happy that myself and the baby came back healthy from the hospital. You should be grateful for that." But Christiana wasn't convinced. "Healthy, yes, but we need a son, Deborah. We need someone to carry on the name of the family. Sylvester is getting older. Don't you think we should be thinking about his legacy?" Deborah's heart sank. The words stung more than they should have. Christiana didn't even try to hide her disappointment anymore. She made no effort to mask the tension in the room. "Let me help you with the baby," Christiana said after a long hesitation, though her tone felt distant. "You seem to be getting tired, Deborah. I've been raising boys all my life. I hope you get to experience that as well." Deborah could sense the undercurrent of control in her voice, but she nodded, grateful for the help, even though she knew it came with strings attached. Mother Christiana moved in the next day to help with the newborn baby, and that was the beginning of the storm. She had always been a strong presence, but now she was impossible to ignore. Every day she would make passive-aggressive comments about the children, about the house, about Deborah's ability to run the household. Deborah would wake up in the morning, try to put the house in order, prepare the children for school and make breakfast for the family. Only for Christiana to complain about everything. She was always commenting bitterly about the food, on the cleanliness, and, more importantly, on Deborah's inability to produce a son. "Deborah, are you sure you're cooking the food the right way this time? Sylvester likes his food with more spice," Christiana asked one morning as she looked at the food on the dining with disgust. Deborah stood by the side, silently watching, but feeling the sting of her words. "It's just fine, Mama. I'm sure he would be happy with it," Deborah replied softly, trying to hold it together. Christiana scoffed. "He's my son. I know what he likes." She paused, looking Deborah over. "Have you thought about the future of our family? We can't just keep going like this. You need to give him a son. If you can't, I will make sure he knows it's not my fault." Deborah's heart sank as her own mother-in-law turned her back to her, leaving the room without eating the food. The words were very painful, and Deborah stood there, frozen, trying to keep her composure, but inside she was crumbling. Over the following weeks, the heat inside the house got hotter. Deborah had never felt so isolated. She loved her children, but Christiana's constant presence made everything feel suffocating. It was as if she could do nothing right in Christiana's eyes. Every day felt like a battle to maintain some sense of dignity, some sense of peace. But peace was slipping through her fingers. One day, after Deborah had spent the entire morning cooking and cleaning, Christiana walked into the kitchen with that all-too-familiar look on her face. "Deborah," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "You know, when I was raising my children, I did everything myself. I didn't need help from anyone. Yet here you are struggling with 4 kids, and still you can't give Sylvester a son." Deborah's heart raced. She could feel the blood rushing to her face as her anger bubbled up inside. "Mama," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've given him everything. I've done my best. Not being able to give birth to a male child is not my fault. We just have to hope the next child comes with the gender we have been praying for. But regardless, male or female, a child is still a child." Christiana crossed her arms, glaring at her. "Your best isn't good enough, Deborah. You've been here long enough, and still, you haven't given my son what he needs. You know what that means, don't you?" Deborah felt the heat rise in her chest. She had had enough. She was now a failure in Christiana's eyes. She was nothing more than a servant, expected to do everything without ever being recognized for the sacrifices she made. "I'm doing the best I can," Deborah shouted, her voice breaking as she turned to face her mother-in-law. "I'm doing everything, Mama Christiana, but nothing I do is ever enough for you, is it?" Christiana's face hardened, and she stood there in silence for a long moment before finally speaking. "You'll never be enough for Sylvester. I'm telling you this for your own good, Deborah. You'll always be second to me." The first time Mother Christiana refused to help with the house chores, Deborah didn't think much of it. She chalked it up to the tiredness of an older woman. But when it happened again, this time after the 3rd meal of the day, Deborah felt a pang of worry. She had never been lazy. She had always cooked, cleaned, and cared for her children with pride. But something about the way Christiana looked at her now felt different. Like she was being judged, not just for the food she made, but for the life she had given her husband. "Deborah!" Christiana's voice cut through the thick silence of the house as she stood in the living room, watching Deborah feeding one of the children. "This is the third time this week you've made jollof rice. You know I don't like it so salty. Is that all you can cook for a man like Sylvester?" Deborah stiffened, her hand pausing mid-air with the spoon. The words stung more than they should have, and she turned to face her mother-in-law. "I'm sorry, Mama," she muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. Christiana's lips curled into a disapproving frown. "You should be, Deborah. This is a man who works hard to provide for you and your daughters. All you do is spend his money, add more weight, and give birth to a whole female football team. You can't even give him a son, not even one boy to carry his name." Deborah felt the weight of those words like a heavy rock pressing down on her chest. She had heard them before, of course, but this time they seemed harsher. This time it felt like Christiana had been waiting for the right moment to say them. "It's not for lack of trying, Mama," Deborah said softly, trying to keep her voice steady. "We can't control these things," Christiana scoffed, her eyes flashing with annoyance. "Control? What do you know of control? You haven't even given Sylvester what he needs. All these girls, and you think he's going to be satisfied?" Deborah's heart sank, but tried not to let the tears spill. She had tried so hard. She loved her daughters, but she knew the look in Sylvester's eyes when he was around his mother. The disappointment was always there, just beneath the surface. "That's not fair," Deborah whispered, feeling the hurt rise in her throat. "I've done my best." "Oh, your best?" Christiane's voice became sharp, like a knife cutting through the air. "Your best? Your best was to give him nothing but daughters, and now here you are, hopeless and still thinking you can get away with it. You can't even help around the house, and this is the thanks you give your husband?" Deborah's mind raced. She wanted to scream, to argue, but she couldn't. Not with Christiana standing there, so sure of herself, so certain that everything Deborah did was wrong. Instead, she bit her lip and stayed silent, feeling the growing weight of her failure. For days, the abuse from Mother Christiana continued. Deborah felt like she was walking on eggshells in her own home. She was expected to clean, wash, go to the market, cook, take care of the children, and constantly cater to Christiana's every need, no matter how unreasonable or unfair. There were no words of encouragement, no praise for her efforts, only criticism, only blame. One afternoon, after returning from a trip to the market with her arms full of bags, Deborah was exhausted from the trip. All the plans to get home and go to bed was abolished by the pest of a mother-in-law. As she stepped into the living room, she was greeted with another scowl from Christiana. "You didn't bring back the right fish. I told you to get the fresh ones, and you bring me this?" Christiana's voice cut through the air like a whip. Deborah felt the tears begin to burn behind her eyes, but she fought them back. Her voice trembled, but she held it together. "I got what was available, Mama. There wasn't anything else at the market today." "I don't care. Why didn't you check out other stores? You're too lazy. All you want to do is sleep. That is why you rushed back from the market," Christiana snapped, rising from her seat. "Do you think I'm here to help you? You're already failing as a wife, and now you're failing as a mother. No son, no decent meal, no help around the house. Just a disappointment." Deborah's throat tightened. She looked at Sylvester sitting on the couch, pretending to ignore the scene unfolding before him. Sylvester had been indifferent to the tension between Deborah and his mother. He had always taken the side of his mother, even when Deborah needed his support. And it wasn't the first time his mother had belittled her. Deborah had endured these moments in silence before. But now something had shifted. She couldn't stay silent any longer. "Mama, I'm sorry. I know I haven't given you the son you want," Deborah said, her voice breaking with the weight of years of pain. "But I've given you 4 beautiful girls. Doesn't that count for something?" "You have no respect for me," Christiana hissed, her voice loud and dangerous. "No respect for your husband, and you dare speak to me like this." Deborah felt the ground was going to swallow her. The truth was, she felt like she had no respect or love in her own home from both her husband and mother-in-law. No matter how much she tried to please Slyvester, to make him proud, he always seemed to side with his mother. The constant criticism, the constant pressure. She was beginning to break under the weight of it all. "I think you should go," Deborah said softly, the words feeling foreign on her tongue. Christiana froze, her mouth open in shock. "What did you say?" "I said, I think it's time for you to leave." Deborah's voice was firm now, the decision clear in her mind. Slyvester finally stood up, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Deborah, you can't just throw my mother out. This is her house too." "You're right, but it's either she leaves or I do," Deborah said quietly. "This is her son's house. But I don't want to live like this anymore. I can't. I don't deserve this, and neither do our children." The room went silent. Deborah's heart pounded as she stared at her husband, willing him to understand. But all she saw was his indecision, his lack of action. Christiana turned away, her face a twisted mask of fury. "You can't do this," she spat. "You'll regret this." "I've been patient, but I won't stay in a house where I'm disrespected. Slyvester, you'll have to choose between me and her." The ultimatum was out there. Deborah had never imagined it would come to this, but she knew it was the only way. She couldn't keep living under the suffocating weight of her mother-in-law's expectations, and since her mother-in-law wasn't going to leave, she would leave for peace to reign. She started making preparations on W0MEN pack-out. The next day, Deborah was preparing the evening meal. The scent of stew and jollof rice filled the house, but the usual comfort of cooking dinner for her family had long faded. Now, the kitchen felt like a battleground. She chopped vegetables, her hands moving automatically, trying to block out the thoughts that always seemed to creep in. It was a quiet night until the door opened with a creak. Deborah didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Christiana's presence in the kitchen had become a constant shadow. The older woman always seemed to hover, like a hawk waiting for the slightest mistake. "Where is that woman called Deborah?" Christiana's voice cut through the air, sharp and cold. "I hope the rice won't be salty this time. Slyvester doesn't deserve your burnt food." Deborah took a deep breath and forced a smile, not wanting to engage in yet another argument. "Mama, I've been cooking for years. The food will be just fine." "Fine? Is that the best you can do for your husband?" Christiana's voice raised slightly, and Deborah felt the familiar sting of criticism. "You always get it wrong." "I've been watching you, Deborah. What kind of wife can't even cook a decent meal for her husband?" Deborah's hands faltered for a moment, but she quickly regained control, trying to stay calm. "I'm doing my best, Mama," she replied softly, her voice trembling. "I have 4 children to take care of. I'm not perfect." "You're right about that," Christiana said, her words dripping with sarcasm. "You're not perfect. You can't even give Slyvester a son, and now you can't even feed him properly." Deborah flinched, the familiar words cutting deep. The sting of not being able to give Slyvester a son was a wound that had never healed. She could feel the weight of Mother Christiana's disappointment on her shoulders like a heavy blanket she could never shake off. As she stirred the soup, Christiana moved closer, standing behind her. "It's always something with you, isn't it?" she sneered. "Why can't you just get it right?" The moment Deborah turned her back to continue cooking, Mother Christiana had taken a bowl of water and poured it over Deborah's back. Deborah stood frozen in shock for a moment, her breath shallow, her body trembling. She could hear Christiana's laughter, cold and unfeeling, cutting through her like a knife. Deborah slowly turned around, tears welling in her eyes. "Why?" Her voice cracked as she looked at her mother-in-law, her heart aching with a mix of betrayal and exhaustion. "Why do you keep doing this?" Christiana's expression was one of satisfaction, as if she had won a long-awaited battle. "Because you need to know your place, Deborah," she said, her voice low and steady. "You think you can keep living in this house and do as you please? You think I'm going to let you destroy my son's family with your incompetence? No, you're not good enough for him. Not good enough for anyone." The tears Deborah had been holding back finally spilled over. She couldn't keep fighting anymore. The emotional weight was too much. She had tried so hard to please Slyvester, to be the perfect wife, but it never seemed enough. The cruelty, the constant rejection, the blame. It had broken her. With a shaky breath, she turned away from Christiana to gather her things. She wasn't sure where she was going, but she knew one thing. She couldn't stay here any longer, not like this. Deborah walked to the bedroom, her heart pounding in her chest. Slyvester was sitting on the edge of the bed, his back to her, unaware of the storm that had just broken out in the kitchen. Deborah paused for a moment, her breath catching in her throat. She wanted to talk to him, to tell him everything, but the words caught in her mouth. Slyvester didn't turn around. He didn't need to. He never did. He had never seen the way his mother treated Deborah. He had never noticed how the weight of his mother's words had chipped away at her until there was nothing left but emptiness. "I can't do this anymore, Slyvester," Deborah whispered, her voice barely audible. Slyvester turned slowly, confusion flickering across his face. "What are you talking about?" Deborah shook her head, tears blurring her vision. "I'm leaving. I can't stay here and keep pretending everything is okay. Your mother, I can't take it anymore." Slyva's face twisted in disbelief. "Deborah, you can't leave. What about the kids? What about us?" She grabbed her bag, her hands shaking. "I have to. I can't stay in a place where I'm not wanted. I've tried everything, but it's never enough. I'm not good enough for her, and I'm not good enough for you anymore." Slyvester stood up, rushing toward her, but she stepped back, holding her hands up. Don't try to stop me. You've never seen it. You've never seen how she treats me, how she's treated me from the very beginning. You've never heard the words she's said to me, the names she's called me, but I have. And I can't live like this anymore." Slyvester's eyes were wide, his mouth opening and closing as if he was searching for something to say, but there were no words. He had been so focused on providing, on being the successful husband and father, that he hadn't seen the toll it was taking on Deborah. He hadn't seen the pain. "I'm sorry, Deborah," he said finally, his voice small and regretful, but it was too late. Deborah turned toward the door. She knew there was no going back, no repairing the damage. She couldn't fix this, not now, not with everything that had happened. As she left the house, she could feel some sense of relief, although still worried on how her children would cope without her. But she had to leave the house for her own good. Once Deborah was gone, Slyvester sat in stunned silence. The house, once full of love and warmth, now felt empty. Mother Christiana, standing in the doorway, wore a satisfied smile. "You've done it now," she said, her voice low but triumphant. "You've broken her, just like I knew you would." Slyvester stood up, his voice shaking with disbelief. "What did you say? What did you do to her? She was never good enough, Slyvester. You couldn't see it. You let her ruin your family, and now look at her. She's gone, and it's your fault. As Sylvester stood there, his heart heavy with regret, Christiana turned away, satisfied with the destruction she had caused. She was already planning her next move, bringing in a new wife, the new woman she believed would finally give her the son she had longed for. Mother Christiana travelled to the village to bring one of her friend's daughters for her son to forcefully marry. Her name is Joy, a chubby and beautiful lady. Joy knew Sylvester was a rich man, so when she was presented with the opportunity, she grabbed it and moved in almost immediately. When she first met Sylvester after moving in, it wasn't love at first sight for her, but there was an eagerness to please, a hope that perhaps she could fulfill her place in this family. When Christiana had introduced her to Sylvester, her smile was wide, almost too wide, as if she were trying to convince herself more than anyone else. "She's just the right kind of woman for you, Sylvester," Mother Christiana said with a touch of satisfaction in her voice as she looked at Joy, who stood beside her, nervously shifting on her feet. Sylvester looked at the woman before him. Joy was beautiful, yes, but there was something else about her that he couldn't quite put his finger on. She was eager, too eager, maybe, but he thought his mother would be happy, and that was the most important thing. Joy had a warmth about her. She was younger than Deborah, filled with youthful energy and ready to work. Christiana saw all of this and it pleased her. She can cook, she can clean, she can take care of the children, she'll be a good wife, and most importantly, she'll give you a son, something that Deborah couldn't do. At those words, Sylvester had nodded, a faint smile crossing his face. "I just want what's best for the family," he had said, not realizing just how much that statement would haunt him later. Mother Christiana's eyes gleamed. "Exactly. She'll bear you a son. She will. She will make you proud." Joy looked down at the floor, unsure whether to smile or not, but her heart swelled with the idea of being the one to please the powerful matriarch. She nodded along, her hopes rising, even if she didn't fully understand the weight of what was expected of her. Joy was eager to please Mother Christiana and Sylvester. She cooked, cleaned, and took care of the children, but it was clear she was overwhelmed. The constant demands of Mother Christiana were suffocating. Yet, Joy did not complain. She did everything with a smile, just as Christiana had instructed. Joy woke early and began to learn the rhythms of the household. She cooked, cleaned, and served meals with a quiet determination. She had hoped it would bring some peace, but she quickly learned that her true role in this house was not just as a caretaker, but as a symbol, a vessel for the son Christiana so desperately wanted. One morning after breakfast, Christiana stood by the kitchen door, arms crossed as she surveyed Joy's work. Joy had just finished washing the dishes, and the kitchen sparkled. It was a small triumph, but for Christiana, it was a sign. "See? Deborah could never do this," Christiana said to herself, mostly, but loud enough for Joy to hear. My dear, you're exactly what he needs." Joy smiled nervously, unsure how to respond. She had no idea what it meant to live up to the impossible standards Christiana had set for her. "You'll be a better wife than she ever was," Christiana continued, her voice dripping with satisfaction. "A woman who knows how to keep a home, who keeps my son happy." She glanced at Joy's tired face, her eyes gleaming with a hidden agenda. "Now, let's see if you can do one thing Deborah couldn't." Over time, Joy took on more responsibilities, more than she had ever signed up for. She woke up before dawn, cooking breakfast for the family, then went on errands for Christiana. She would go to the market and return with bags full of food, her arms aching with the weight of the vegetables, meat, and spices she had bought. One afternoon, as Joy returned from the market, Christiana sat on the porch, watching her approach. "You're late," Christiana remarked coolly, barely looking up. "What took you so long? I thought you'd be back sooner." Joy, out of breath from carrying the heavy bags, didn't answer immediately. She just smiled weakly, dropped the bags and stood up straight, ready for whatever criticism Christiana would throw her way. She had learned to brace herself for it. "I'm sorry, Mama," Joy said, her voice quiet. "The market was crowded and I had to wait." Christiana waved her hand dismissively. "Excuses, excuses. You should know better than to waste time. I expect better, and I hope you're cooking something better than the last meal. Deborah never seemed to get it right, but I'm sure you'll manage." Joy nodded, a part of her feeling that the longer she stayed, the more she was expected to prove herself. First to Christiana, and now to Slyvester, who remained oddly silent in the background. She went to the kitchen, hoping for a moment of quiet. There were days when she felt like she could barely breathe, the pressure of trying to please everyone suffocating her. Mother Christiana was pleased. At least on the surface she appeared to be. Joy did everything with an almost unflinching willingness. But behind the scenes, Christiana's approval came with sharp comparisons and insults that left Joy with a bruised heart. As the days passed, Joy's frustration deepened. She had once been eager to please, but the constant demands were beginning to wear her down. Christiana's praise, though frequent, was always tinged with an underlying cruelty. She had begun to compare Joy to Deborah so much that Joy started to question her worth. One afternoon, after Joy had spent hours washing clothes by hand and cleaning the house, Christiana approached her in the kitchen, this time without the usual praise. Instead, she looked at Joy's tired face and scoffed. "Are you really this tired? Deborah could handle it better than you. She was just lazy. But I'm not worried about you. You'll get used to it." Joy, her body aching from the day's chores, nodded silently. She wasn't sure how much longer she could keep up this facade, pretending to be the perfect wife Christiana expected. The honeymoon phase for Joy didn't last long. At first, everything had seemed perfect. She had come into the house with fresh enthusiasm, eager to please Christiana and fulfill her role as the perfect wife and mother. The praise she received, the quiet satisfaction in Christiana's eyes, had made her feel welcome, even if she knew deep down it was only temporary. But now, weeks had passed, and things had started to shift. Joy noticed it in the 3rd month. The once polite requests from Mother Christiana had turned into demands. The tone of voice was no longer sweet, but sharp, laced with annoyance. Every task that Joy performed seemed to be under a microscope. No matter how much she cleaned, how carefully she prepared the meals, Christiana always found something to criticize. One afternoon, as Joy prepared a pot of rice in the kitchen, Christiana stood by the doorway, arms crossed, a look of disapproval on her face. The kitchen smelled of spices and freshly cooked food, but Joy could tell by the way her mother-in-law's gaze lingered that something was off. "You've burnt the rice again, right?" Christiana said harshly, her words slicing through the air. Joy's stomach sank. She hadn't burnt the rice, it was perfectly cooked, as it always was. But Christiana was never satisfied. "Mama, it's not burnt," Joy replied, her voice tinged with frustration. Christiana raised an eyebrow. "You think I don't know the difference between well-cooked rice and burnt rice? This is just like how you do everything, half-hearted. Slyvester deserves better." Joy's hand trembled slightly as she stirred the pot, trying to contain the anger rising within her. "I've done my best, Mama. I don't understand why you're always on me," Christiana sneered. Your best isn't good enough. My son needs a woman who knows how to care for him, not a woman who thinks good enough is acceptable. You don't even know how to take care of this house." Joy's chest tightened as the words hit her like a slap. It wasn't the first time Christiana had insulted her, but today something inside Joy snapped. She had been patient, putting up with the criticism, trying to win Christiana's approval, but now it felt like she was suffocating. "I'm doing everything." Joy's voice cracked with frustration. "I cook, I clean, I take care of the children, I do everything you ask of me, but nothing is ever good enough for you." Christiana laughed harshly. "You think you're special just because you do what you're supposed to do. You're just like the others, Joy, always trying to do everything right but still failing. You couldn't even get pregnant, not to talk of giving Sylvester a son." That was it, the last straw. Joy felt a surge of rage flowing through her veins. She grabbed the bowl of soapy water from the counter and without thinking poured it onto Christiana's lap, drenching her. The room fell silent. For a long moment no one moved. Christiana stood there soaking wet, her eyes wide with shock and disbelief. Her mouth moved as if she was going to speak, but no words came out. Joy stood, trembling with both anger and fear. She had never thought she would do something like this, but the years of abuse, the constant verbal lashings, the degrading comments, it all came crashing down in that instant. "I can't do this anymore," Joy shouted, her voice raw with emotion. "I've had enough of this, enough of you, enough of all of this." Tears filled her eyes as she turned, dropping the bowl in her hands and walking away. She could hear Christiana's angry shouts behind her, but she didn't stop. Her legs carried her toward the bedroom, where she threw open her suitcase, hastily stuffing clothes inside. The house that had once seemed like a fresh start now felt like a prison. Sylvester had been in his room, working on some business deals, when he heard the commotion. The shouts, the sound of things being thrown. He immediately rushed out of his room, his heart racing, unsure of what he would find. As he entered the living room, he saw Christiana standing there, drenched in soap water, her face red with fury. Joy was nowhere to be seen, but her suitcase was on the floor, half-packed. "What happened?" Sylvester asked, his voice full of confusion. Christiana glared at him, her voice venomous. "That disrespectful girl. She poured soap water on me. She's out of control, Sylvester. She's just like others. She thinks she can do whatever she wants." Sylvester turned to look at the mess on the floor. His mind raced as he tried to make sense of the situation. For years, he had let his mother take control of their lives, thinking that everything she did was for the good of the family. But now, something was different. He had been blind to the toll it had taken on his wives, and now Joy had finally broken. He walked to the bedroom where Joy had just finished packing. Her back was turned, but when she heard him enter, she stood up, wiping her eyes quickly. "Joy, wait," Sylvester said softly, his voice filled with confusion and concern. "Why are you leaving?" Joy turned to face him, her eyes red from crying. "I can't stay here, Sylvester. Your mother... She's made my life unbearable. She insults me, criticizes me. I've tried to please her, but nothing works. Nothing will ever be enough for her." Sylvester's heart clenched in his chest as he saw the hurt in her eyes. He had always known his mother was difficult, but he had never understood just how far her cruelty had gone. And now, it was too late. "I never wanted this for you," he said quietly. "I never wanted her to hurt you. But I've been blind. I should have seen what was happening." Joy shook her head, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "It's too late now, Sylvester. I can't keep living like this." Sylvester stood in the doorway. His brain was spinning in thoughts. He had failed her. He had failed both Deborah and Joy. And now he had to make a decision and take his home under his control. He couldn't let this continue. He couldn't let his mother tear apart his family. The next morning, Sylvester called for Mother Christiana to come to the living room. His heart was heavy as he prepared for the confrontation that had been years in the making. When she entered, her eyes narrowed, sensing something wasn't right. "What is it, Sylvester?" she asked, her voice sharp. "Why have you called me here?" "I can't keep doing this anymore, Mama," he said, his voice firm, though his heart was heavy. "I've let you manipulate me for too long, and it's destroyed everything. Deborah, and now Joy. I've watched you tear apart the women in my life, and I won't let you do it to anyone else." Mother Christiana froze, her eyes widening in disbelief. "You want me to leave?" she asked, almost as if she couldn't comprehend his words. "After everything I've done for you, for this family, you want me to leave because of her, because of Deborah, because of Joy?" Her voice trembled with a mixture of disbelief and hurt. "I've been your mother all these years, and you're just going to throw me away like I'm nothing?" She stepped back, the hurt on her face suddenly turning to fury. "You wouldn't even have a family without me, Slyvester," she shouted. "I raised you, I took care of you, and now you're going to kick me out of my own son's house?" Slyvester's jaw tightened. "I can't keep living this way, Mama. I can't keep pretending everything is fine when it's not. I've watched you destroy the happiness of everyone around me, my wife, my children, and I won't let you do it anymore. This is my family now, and I will protect them." Mother Christiana let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head as if she couldn't believe what was happening. "You really think you can keep your family together like this?" she sneered. "You think you can take care of the family alone? You'll see." "I don't care what you think," Slyvex replied, his voice cold but determined. "You need to leave, and I mean it. I won't let you tear this family apart anymore." Mother Christiana's eyes flashed with fury, but there was a slight tremble in her voice as she spoke again. "You'll regret this, Slyvester. Mark my words. I've sacrificed so much for you, and you're throwing it all away for a woman who won't even give you a son." Her voice broke, though she quickly masked the vulnerability with a hardened look. "You'll see." Slyvester didn't flinch. "I've made my decision, Mama. You're leaving first thing tomorrow morning. Get your thing ready. I will drop you off at the park before going to work." For a moment there was silence between them, and then, with one last look full of anger and hurt, Mother Christiana turned and left the room, her footsteps echoing through the house. The next few days, after his mother had gone back to the village, Slyvester had never felt such an emptiness before. The house was cold and lonely. He had been searching for Deborah, but she had disappeared without a trace. He called her number, but it was switched off. His heart sank with every unanswered call. He drove to her parents' house, hoping that they might know where she was, but when he arrived, her mother looked at him with a sorrowful expression. "She hasn't come to visit in a while, Slyvester," she said, concern lining her voice. "We thought you two were working things out." Slyvester's stomach twisted. Where could she be? He called some of her close friends, but none of them had heard from her either. It was as if she had vanished, and the longer he searched, the more his heart filled with fear and anxiety. Days went by, and still there was no sign of her. Slyvester tried to focus on taking care of the children, but the weight of worry hung heavy on him. Cooking dinner, doing the laundry, these were tasks he had never truly understood the weight of before. But now, with Deborah and Joy gone, he realized how much he had taken them for granted. It was late one evening when the phone rang. Slyvester stared at the screen, and for a moment his heart stopped. It was an unknown number. "Hello?" he answered, his voice shaky. "Hello, Mr. Slyvester," came a calm voice on the other end. "This is Dr. Adewale, your wife's doctor. I'm calling because your wife Deborah has just delivered a baby." The news hit him like a wave. "A baby? How did that happen?" His voice cracked. "What do you mean? Where is she? Is she okay?" "Yes, she had a bit of a complication with the delivery, but she's fine now. She's been here for the last 2 days, and we're reaching out because your contact was listed on her emergency details." Slyvester's heart leapt. He didn't care about the complications, neither did he care about the gender of the baby. His wife was safe, that was his main concern. He quickly hung up and rushed out of the house. The air felt lighter now, though the worry didn't fully leave him. His mind raced. Was she angry? Had she forgiven him? His body seemed to move of its own accord as he drove to the hospital, desperate to see her, to hold her, and to beg for her forgiveness. When Slyvester finally reached the hospital, he ran through the halls, his heart pounding in his chest. All he could think about was Deborah, the woman he had failed. He reached the room where the nurse had told him Deborah was, and as he stepped inside, his breath caught in his throat. There she was. Deborah lying in bed, a tired but peaceful expression on her face. In her arms she cradled a tiny bundle, wrapped carefully in a blanket. For a moment, all Slyvester could do was stand there, his heart swelling at the sight of his wife and their newborn baby. He had missed so much. He had been so blind to what was happening in his own home. Deborah looked up at him, her eyes weary, but when she saw him, they softened. Her voice was quiet but steady. "You found me," she whispered, a hint of surprise in her tone. Slyvester stepped forward, his eyes never leaving her face. "Deborah, I'm so sorry," he said, his voice raw with emotion. "I didn't realize how much I was hurting you. I didn't see how much my mother's words were tearing you apart. Please forgive me." Deborah's hand rested gently on the baby, her face filled with a sadness that Slyvester knew all too well. "I had to leave, Slyvester," she said softly. "I couldn't handle the stress. It wasn't just about the pain. I was carrying a baby. I had to protect myself and the pregnancy. If I stayed, I might have lost the child. The stress was too much." Slyvester's heart broke hearing those words, knowing that he had been so blind to everything that was happening. "I should have seen it, Deborah. I should have been there for you," he said, his voice shaking. "I didn't know, but I've learnt, and I'm asking you, please come back home. I don't care about anything else. I just want you back. I want our family back." Deborah closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath before she looked at him again. "Slyvester, I'm not angry with you," she said, her voice calm but firm. "I love you. I've always loved you. But I need some space. I need time to heal. We have 5 children now, and I need help. I can't do this alone. I need a domestic worker to help me with the children and the house chores." Slyvester nodded immediately, a sense of relief washing over him. "Of course. Anything you need, I'll get someone to help, I promise." Deborah smiled weakly, her gaze softening as she looked at their newborn son. "And there's one more thing." Slyvester's brow furrowed. "What is it, Deborah? Anything. Tell me." "I need space from your mother," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't live with her, at least for now, for my sanity, for my health." Slyvester's heart clenched at the mention of his mother, but he nodded, his voice firm. "She's gone, Deborah. I sent her back to the village. She won't be coming back anytime soon." Deborah's eyes widened, relief washing over her like a wave. "You did that for me." "I did it for us," he said quietly, walking over to her side. "I want you to be happy. I want us to be happy." Slyvester reached for Deborah's hand, his heart full of gratitude. That mattered was that they had found each other again. Deborah looked at him, her eyes softening. "You didn't even ask about the baby," she said, her voice teasing, though there was a warmth in it. "We have a son now?" Slyvester screaming in excitement, his heart swelling with pride. "Oh my God! You gave birth to a son! This is the best news of the year! Thank you, baby! Thank you for not giving up on me, regardless of how much trouble my mother caused you," he said with a big smile and dropped a kiss on Deborah's cheeks. Deborah leaned in and kissed him too, her heart finally at peace. And in that moment, as they held their newborn son, everything that had torn them apart seemed to fade away. Sylvester had made his mistakes, but now he had the chance to make things right. And with Deborah by his side, he would never take their love for granted again. Their family felt whole once more. The joy that had been absent for so long returned, and they walked toward their future together.